It just wouldn't be a Winnipeg Jets season without some off-season drama to make everything interesting before preseason even kicks off.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support and are so glad that you are joining us as we are about to kick preseason off. And, while the vibes are certainly not at the best, they certainly can't be feeling much better after today's news that Ville Heinola is now going to miss a good chunk of time for the foreseeable future. The young defender, last year was primed to have a big spot with the Jets and, unfortunately broke his ankle, and that same ankle is now afflicting him again. We'll talk about what specifically is going wrong and maybe some slightly positive news on it in just a little bit. Before we go there, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, like I said, Heinola, unfortunately, is going to miss time, and it sounds like it's not a light injury. There was swelling that was detected on a medical around his ankle, and I guess it wasn't really bothering him because apparently he's just been dealing with it. I don't know if he's noticed it before. I would have to think that he's probably been looking at it, but then maybe thought, maybe it's just some slight pain, something, maybe taking a bit of a knock in practice. Whatever the case may be, they took a closer look and they have determined that it, in fact, is infection and actually might be related to a screw that he has in his ankle, which is really, really unfortunate. As somebody who actually had surgery last year, I don't know if you can even see on the camera, but I had, quite a few plates and screws mounted in my wrist. And so obviously when you have a surgery like this, there is a risk of post-surgery infection, which can be really bad. Depending on the length of time after it happens, it can be really devastating if it's right after your surgery. In Heinola's case, it's actually been some time since the surgery. So maybe, just maybe, his bones have all healed. And when they have to go in and clean out the wound and everything, maybe it's not going to be as bad. So I've seen, people who are either involved in the medical field or have some knowledge of this sort of surgery and potential recovery suggest that if it's not that bad, Heinola may miss like a month or so. Conceivably, there is a timeline where he goes through rehab after surgery and ends up playing sometime in late October. I wouldn't put money on that. I've heard 2 months maybe being another potential timeline. Until they have a physician take a look and assess the severity of the infection, we're just not going to know. So suffice it to say, I think the biggest thing is just really sad that, Heinola, again, on the cusp of making the team and very likely having some sort of a role this year, has his chances really snatched away by something that's not even in his control. Thankfully, it's not as bad as it was when he broke his ankle. So if you're looking for some positive spin, it's not as serious as that, right? Breaking the ankle was way worse, much longer recovery timeline. This time, he is likely to come back sometime in the relatively near future, right? It's going to be before American Thanksgiving, before Christmas and stuff. So that's good news. Unless it's much worse than we know, but so far it doesn't seem to be at least that case at first blush. The fact that it wasn't causing him like a ton of pain, or at least enough that he reported it, seems to be an indication that maybe it's not nearly as serious as it could have been. Not that I'm going to sit here and say it's a good thing or that he's feeling great, but given the alternatives, I guess this is probably about as okay a diagnosis, at least preliminarily speaking, that you could ask for. Again, I don't want to use a lot of optimistic language here because it's bad that it even happened. But given the circumstances, given what could have happened, hopefully, this is a relatively shorter recovery. Now, another piece of drama that continues to be a bit of a bugbear for the Jets, Cole Perfetti and the front office continue to not be, I guess, that close on a contract extension. Now, my guess is that he's asking for Pinto money and the Jets want to give him like 3 to 3.25 mil, which in my mind, I really feel like that's not that big of a gap. And I don't know, to some degree, there's one school of thought that you need to save money wherever you can. But the other school of thought is if it's really just a couple 100,000 and you go this route and you sort of put him through some significant challenges to sign this deal, does that really hurt your relationship, especially when you're negotiating a long-term deal? And, Perfetti has been really professional throughout the whole process. He has even shown up at times to some of the early training sessions, did the media tour. So it's not like he doesn't want to be a Jet. But, the Jets are playing hardball, and I think that at some point this could hurt them in the future. But it's especially frustrating because we just saw Dylan Genther today sign an 8-year, $7 million per season deal, which if you're the Jets and you got Perfetti at 8x7, that'd be, or 7x8, I guess in this case, that'd be pretty darn phenomenal. I think that would be a really good value contract for Winnipeg. I think you'd be laughing to the bank in a couple of seasons. And honestly, for Perfetti, having guaranteed $7 million for the next 8 years would be pretty darn nice. You could suggest that the Jets might end up saving money on that deal pretty significantly, and I would be inclined to agree. I think at the end of his bridge, if that's what he signs, it's going to be a real big raise for him, and it probably starts at least in the $8 million range. So, for me, I don't quite understand why the Jets are playing it this way, but this is just how they operate. I think it's a little frustrating that they keep doing this kind of stuff. I think that there's reason to nickel and dime some players, but when it comes to your potentially star young prospects and players, especially for a city like Winnipeg that's now gone through multiple young players and prospects demanding trades and forcing their way out, I just don't see why you would play games with one of your most talented prospects who had 38 points playing 13 and a half minutes last year. I know people might look at that and say, well, that's just, decent production, but I think you have to look at how he's doing it. That's like fourth line minutes, and there is no fourth liner out there scoring anywhere near the rate that Perfetti was in the minutes that he was playing on a routine basis. You just don't see that. And so, he gets a bigger role this year under Arniel, and I promise you, it might not take him that long to hit like 50, 60, 70 points this season. I think he is primed for a huge breakout year. And at the end of his bridge, I can tell you, I think the Jets are going to regret not getting him locked up long term. But there is still time to do that before the start of the season. They just kind of need to pick up the pace and maybe close that gap sooner than later. The longer you let this sit, the worse it's going to be for everyone involved. Now, sort of on another related note, perhaps in talking about reactions and how the fans are feeling, Scott Arniel asked for some patience, and I think that was probably due to some stuff that he likely heard from Jets fans, or at least saw on the postings. I'm going to guess that Arniel probably reads Twitter, probably reads commentary. He seems to be relatively hip to stuff. I want to chat about his comments and perhaps, what he said about some of the training camp lines in just a quick moment. But before we go too much further, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Gametime. When it comes to buying tickets, a lot of you are used to paying really big prices because you open your checkout, your cart for checkout, and you find out that you're paying like double some of what you were expecting to pay for a ticket, right? Maybe you bought like a $30 ticket and you get $15 to $20 added in fees. You ask yourself, am I even buying one ticket or is it two tickets, right? Stuff just got, really expensive over the last several years, and, it's hard to save time and money. Gametime knows your struggles. They've been there before, and that's why they want to help you save time and money by offering you curated deals, super flash sales, zone deals, all backed by their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and so much more. Best of all, they even show you the view from your seat, so you're not just buying a blind seat in this section without a perception of what you're going to be able to actually watch, whether you're going for sports or a concert, what have you. They've got all the fun events you could possibly ask for, and now they have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And when you toggle the all-in pricing option, you can see what you're paying up front from the start, which is great for saving time, helps you decide if this is the deal you want, and just saves you time and money, right? Everyone wants to have upfront honesty, and Gametime is there to help. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, go with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode, as we're just catching up with some of Scott Arniel's comments to the media earlier today and late yesterday. Obviously, Jets fans probably had some mixed feelings about the training camp lines, and I can understand that. I think a lot of people were seeing some of the same stuff that they've seen in previous seasons. Connor, Scheifele, Velarde, Ehlers not on the first line. And obviously that triggered quite a bit of panic in the fan base. I think, a lot of people probably jumped the gun just slightly on their interpretation of things. I think I said on a previous episode that I wasn't going to read too much into it and that I wasn't really going to panic just yet. I had the sense that, maybe it was a question of getting guys up to speed with line mates that they're familiar with. A lot of these dudes haven't been on the ice all that much this offseason. A lot of them have probably been on the beaches more than anything. Trading ice for sand, I think, is probably a good way to think about it. And when you haven't played for a while and you really haven't been practicing or training too intensely, sometimes you just need to play with guys that you're familiar with to get up to speed, have some scrimmages, have some passes. And that was kind of my thought, right? And it seems like Arniel actually said almost the same exact thing in his comments to, it was either Mike McIntyre or Scott Billeck. And I think that kind of encapsulates what I was suggesting earlier. Arniel kind of cautioned Jets fans not to read too much into training camp lines. I am inclined to agree. I think, the early lines are just suggesting who is going to be playing this weekend and who's likely sitting for the next couple of days. And so I didn't really want to overreact. This is probably the most patient I've been in a while, partly because Arniel himself sort of tipped the fact that he doesn't really have a definitive answer on who's on the first line yet. I think he said that a few weeks ago. Maybe it's even a few months ago at this point, because it's been a while, right? It's been a long off season. But I think Arniel was very clear in that perhaps some of the old line combinations are not going to remain the way that they were in previous seasons. They might be for a couple of scrimmages, but I get the sense that he wants to shake things up. And he just wants to do it once everyone is back up to speed and they've had more than a couple of skates together. So for me, I'm going to wait until deeper into preseason to start being concerned and worried. If the stuff continues and we see those line combos rear their heads again, especially late in preseason, right before the start of the season, that's when I would start to be concerned. If they start doing that, if they start making those rushes and combinations a routine thing on shifts in preseason, that's where I think you have legitimate concern to be, or legitimate cause to be concerned. If they keep going back to the same well that didn't work before, that's where I think you can quibble with it. But until then, I'm just going to be patient. I know that I'm not always that kind of person. Sometimes I've jumped the gun on things. With Arniel, I feel like I can give him the benefit of the doubt. He is the person who came up with Ehlers, Scheifele, and Velarde to begin with. Not like it's a crazy leap of logic to make that line. I mean, I wouldn't imagine that it's crazy and particularly hard to just go with that combination. But, by the same token, he was the one who did it. So I'll give credit where credit is due. He's the one who came up with that line. He ran it for a good several weeks. And, I would have imagined he'd probably have kept it going if Bones hadn't come back, which, perhaps suggests that Arniel is more interested in getting the right outcomes for a more modern style of team. And I feel like he can be, fairly savvy about his observations. His early interviews seem to suggest that he's looking at the right areas. And so for now, I feel like he has earned our patience. He has asked for it. He said that, the first few months are probably going to be a little up and down. The way that he wants this team to play is a little bit against their typical identity. There's going to be young kids joining the lineup. There's going to be some, lineup adjustments and stuff. And he has his own systems. There's going to be new special teams. And so, overall, I think the vibe is just, let's wait and see. Maybe not rush to judgments this time like we usually do. A lot of us are reactionary. I've certainly been guilty of it myself. With Arniel, I'm just inclined to give him, more of a leash, if you will. I feel like he's earned that based on the comments, based on sort of the offseason stuff that he's done. And I would hope that he's actually allowed to execute the vision of hockey that he really wants to as much as he can at this level. So, he asked for some patience. He said, don't panic, don't read too much into things yet. I will reserve my judgment until we see a bit more. Like I said, though, if you start to get to like game 3, 4 of preseason and those lines do hold, yeah, you might ask some questions. But hopefully he has a reasonable enough experience base from having worked with some of these guys to know that there are some combos that just don't really work, or if you have to have them together, in this case, Scheifele and Connor, then at least play Ehlers with them. That trio did actually work reasonably well enough to where you're at least break even if it's not ideal. But we also know that he knows Ehlers, Scheifele, and Velarde played pretty well together. And hopefully Ehlers is, ready for a healthy season. Sounded like he had a pretty serious neck injury last year that really impacted his ability to play at this level. And I think it was definitely noticeable in like the first few weeks where he couldn't skate and move like he was in previous years. And maybe that's one reason why part of me is a little concerned about extending him long-term. He does get hurt a lot. And as much as I think his skill set and value to the team are really almost impossible to replace, I just worry that, he's at the age where these injuries, if they do continue, are going to really limit his availability in the future. So some real tough questions to answer, but at least for now, we've got Ehlers for the foreseeable future this season. Maybe that changes. Maybe he gets traded sometime in either this, before the start of the season or by the trade deadline. I'd hope that they would have a clearer answer as to whether or not they're extending him. I'd certainly like him to stay. I totally understand if that's not really in his best interest. So all that to say, this year's going to be a weird one. And so when Arniel asks for patience, I was already prepared to give it. I know that this year is probably going to be a bit of a trial and error season. If things really go well and the Jets hit it out of the park and everything goes smoothly, well, maybe you can start to expect a decent playoff run, even if it's not a super deep one. But I know for me, I'm just not even worried about the playoffs right now. We haven't even gotten through preseason yet. My expectations for the season are going to be held in check. It's not like previous years where I think the Jets have tons of veteran depth and skill to work with. Winnipeg really can't afford more than like 2 injuries to any of their players. And if they do experience any injuries, it would probably be better for it to be somewhere in the bottom 6 where they have a lot more guys to help out there. They just don't have replacements for the top 6 and some of the top defenders. So yeah, going to be a rough one. In terms of who might replace Heinola, Stanley has extended, but I think they might maybe give some leash to Hayden Fleury or maybe even Dylan Coghlan in the preseason to see if either of those guys can anchor the third pairing. I mean, it's not going to be ideal either way. Obviously, Heinola was expected to be the number 5D for this team. He may still be when he gets back, but it's going to be some time. And so let's hope that some of the free agents the Jets picked up are ready to step up and immediately help contribute to this team, because it seems like at least one of them is likely to start getting some NHL games to start the season. But let me know which of these defenders you would choose for the number 5 spot. Would you go with the Stanimal? Would you look at Dylan Coghlan? What about Hayden Fleury? Is there maybe another name that you're thinking of? Maybe somebody that I'm not really paying attention to right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below or at my social medias at @LivingLoco and at @LO_Winnipeg Jets. And be sure to tell me what you think of Arniel's comments. Do you trust him? Do you think that he is a guy that we should give, some time to? Are you not really buying it? How do you feel? Let me know. Well, while we're at it, also thought it'd be probably worth talking about the preseason because guess what? It starts tomorrow. The Jets are kicking off preseason against the Minnesota Wild, which is always fun. We all hate the Wild. They hate us. And so this recently really violent rivalry is coming back. And I think tomorrow could see some sparks as you're going to have some kids and a couple of veterans who are maybe on the fringes really vying to make a name for themselves and earn an NHL spot. But before we talk about what to expect over this weekend of action, just wanted to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel because they're America's #1 sports book. But, for as many sports as they cover, obviously, this is an NHL podcast, but they've got tons of stuff for NFL, NBA, college, you name it. They've got all the sports covered, tons of props, odds, lines, bets, you name it, they've got it. But what about something a little bit different, right? What about a special offer? Well, we have just the ticket for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. All you need is a YouTube TV base plan, which helps you watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook and get started today. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're just chatting ahead of what should be a fairly energetic start to preseason tomorrow. Obviously, the Jets are taking on the Wild. We hate the Wild. They hate us. Both parties are generally not terribly fond of each other, and whenever we play these teams, they seem to injure at least one Jet, and Winnipeg is probably, being held responsible for the death of Kirill Kaprizov, which, of course, was a complete accident. But that's sort of beside the point, right? As far as what I'm expecting out of this first game, I think it's going to be messy. I think we're going to see lots of imperfect play. Arniel has already suggested that the lineup is going to be very young, so that's kind of what I'm anticipating. I think the Jets are going to run some children, so to speak, the Moose lines maybe. We're not really going to have very many veterans in the lineup, so, given the youthful approach, I would expect lots of sloppy hockey. This is going to be the first realish game that any of these guys have had in months, and that comes with the territory, right? You haven't played in a while. You are likely to be getting used to some new systems. Arniel has probably been preaching a bit of a different approach from what Bones wanted. I don't think he'll have made tremendous changes just to start. I think he'll start to make his adjustments tactically as the season starts to wear on. And I think he'll want to be patient and make sure that he's not rushing things. But, with the veterans, he probably has a little bit more leash to make some changes, get aggressive with some of his adjustments and try and play a more up-tempo modern game. I think that's going to be the primary adjustment. I think he's going to want more offense. And that being the case, I think that would certainly benefit Winnipeg's attackers who, really need an injection of speed and skill. So for this team, I think Winnipeg is going to, have a little bit of a tough time, at least to start against the Wild. Minnesota tends to play a very physical style. I don't even know who's in their prospect pool at this point, so I'm not really sure what kind of lineup they're going to be fielding. I think they're going to have, relatively few veterans in, but if they start to have some of their minor league players who are more of the tough guys, that could be a tough thing for some of the Jets kids to deal with. Minnesota, not exactly a team that's known to be very friendly, despite being from a friendly Midwestern state. The Wild are the furthest thing from friendly opponents. So my biggest hope is that everyone just stays healthy, don't get injured. You don't want to derail the start of your season before you even start the season. So, yeah, let's just hope that tomorrow Winnipeg makes it through. I don't really care about preseason too much, except for just some early diagnostics for potential line combos and stuff. Maybe some players who are going to be fighting for NHL spots. But otherwise, my primary goal is for the Jets to stay healthy. So as long as they do that, I don't care what the scoreline is. The next game will be on Sunday. That'll be an away game to the Oilers. Obviously, Edmonton probably not bringing out Mick Draisaitl for this one, unless there's a real big surprise. I would expect that, Winnipeg is going to field a pretty decent prospect pool compared to what Edmonton has. The Oilers are a little bit destitute when it comes to some of their, younger players, but in terms of like depth guys that they can call upon for, the more veteran experience, they've definitely got those guys, and I'm curious to know how they're going to approach preseason. I think for both Minnesota and Edmonton, they're going to have maybe a bit more veteran talent available to them than the Jets are planning to use, but we'll have to wait and see how the Jets arrange themselves. We did not get a look at the lines today necessarily. I think we'll see them early tomorrow as they start to warm up and get ready for practice. But otherwise, we just have to be patient. I think this offseason and the regular season that's coming, it's going to be a year of patience, so get used to that word. A lot of sitting and waiting for something to happen, man. Whether it's contract extensions, trades, you name it, it has been a bit of a stop and go off season. But, sometimes that's not the worst. Thankfully, there's been other sports to sort of distract us. But you know what? I'm just glad that the preseason's finally here. The Young Stars Classic was a cool little teaser. But again, just a bit of a teaser for what I'm hoping is a productive season. Preseason, obviously, one of the longest 2 weeks of every hockey fan's life. But, hey, this is going to be a chance for some of the kids to really make a name for themselves. We're going to see some guys that we're likely not to see for the rest of the year because they're either going to be with the Moose or they're going back to juniors or something. So let's just enjoy it while we can, enjoy some of our young prospects. Jagger's been in camp, so it'd be fun to see how he does. I said he was a lot closer to the NHL than I was expecting, and I still hold to that. So now we might get a chance to see how he actually does against some real pro-level competition. But let me know your expectations for preseason below. What are you looking for? What are you hoping for? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at @LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter. For tonight's show, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Obviously, next week I'm going to have some in-depth thoughts about these preseason games. I may have a short little thing going out each of Saturday and Sunday, but that's kind of to be determined. We'll have to see how much there is to talk about the game and if I want to avoid spoiling it. So in the meantime, obviously, just get ready for Jets hockey. We've got Winnipeg playing 2 preseason games. Obviously, it's not quite regular hockey, but you know what? It's the closest that we're going to get for now. So just enjoy it until the regular season actually starts in early October. But for tonight's show, that is all the time that we have. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.